Chapter 6 Why Governments Fail by Peter J. Boettke and Douglas B. Rogers.
There is an old tale that many economists use to set up the discussion of how well the market works in comparison to government policy. A Roman emperor is asked to judge a contest between two singers. After hearing the first contestant sing, the emperor rewards the prize to the second singer under the assumption that surely the second cannot be worse than the first. What is wrong with this? Clearly, for the contest to be an accurate measure of talent, the emperor must let the second contestant sing before passing judgment. It is similar when we are asked to compare the market economy with government action. We should carefully examine not only how the market economy works, but also how government decisions will be made. The theory of a government failure. Markets are not perfect. We discuss possible examples of market failure below. But that should not lead to the automatic conclusion that government policy can improve upon the market outcome. Instead, it may make matters worse. This basic point is often overlooked in efforts to justify government interventions into the market economy. The theory of a government failure was developed to explain why government policy often fails to achieve its aims. The political decision-making process has to cope with several problems. These include the difficulties of calculating costs and benefits, a lack of detailed knowledge of time and place, and attempted manipulations of policy by special interest groups. In order to compare market outcomes with government interventions, we must take the costs of government decisions making into account. Indeed, when we do this, the standard argument, markets fail, use government, breaks down. Why governments can't solve market failure? A brief look at three standard types of market failure, monopoly, externalities, and public goods, will help us demonstrate some of the problems that arise when governments intervene.
Monopoly.
It is argued that with a monopoly, the single supplier of a good or service has control over the final price of their product. It will use that power to restrict output and raise the price of the good or service being offered. Since there are no substitutes, consumers have little choice but to buy from the monopoly. They have to pay higher prices than they would if there were competition. The main problem with seeing monopolies as a market failure is that they are usually created by the power of government. Monopoly rights are given to a certain party by government, preventing others from competing. In other words, monopoly is not usually a product of the market economy. In most cases, it results from government giving privileges to a special interest group.
Externalities.
An externality is a cost or benefit imposed by one party on another party who has no say in the matter. Economists distinguish between negative and positive externalities. The classic example of a negative externality is pollution. The production process in my factory may spoil the river where I dump my waste. The waste is carried downstream, ruining my neighbor's crops. Because I do not have to pay the full cost of my decision to pollute, I will overproduce the negative externality of pollution. Positive externalities reflect the opposite effect. Others will benefit from the effects of my decision, even though they do not have to pay any of the costs of my decision. Take education, for example. The more educated I am, the more I will be able to contribute to community life. However, since the community will benefit more than me, I will underproduce education if I have to pay for it myself. In theory, governments can correct this problem by taxing activities that produce negative externalities and subsidizing activities that produce positive externalities. They can set the levels of taxes and subsidies so that the benefits of the activity are maximized for society as a whole. This solution assumes, however, that government can measure the costs and benefits involved. There are major problems with this. First, only those directly affected really know the costs and benefits of an activity. This means any government solution is likely to fail because there is no way to access the required information. Second, the people involved may agree a contract to solve a dispute over an externality. For example, if I value a clean river more than a factory values polluting it, I can pay the factory not to pollute. In such cases, there is no need for the government to get involved.
Public goods.
Public goods are our final example of market failure. there is little incentive for profit-seeking businesses to provide some goods in the market. This may be because it is impossible to exclude those who do not pay, and because the consumption of the good does not prevent others from consuming the good. Typical examples may include law enforcement, national defense, and environmental goods such as clean air. The lack of a profit incentive means such public goods may be underprovided unless government acts by providing them itself. Yet most of what government provides as public goods could be supplied at least partly by the market. For example, law enforcement by private security and defense by hired fighters. Even environmental goods can be supplied by profit-seeking businesses when suitable property rights allow the exclusion of those who do not pay. And let's not forget that attempts by governments to supply public goods will still face the problems identified by the theory of government failure.
Markets as problem solvers.
Our brief look at monopoly, externalities, and public goods has shown that government attempts to correct apparent market failures may often be misguided. Indeed, economists have given reason why the market might not be as bad as policymakers are inclined to believe. So far, we have neglected the true potential for the market to self-correct. Today's inefficiencies are tomorrow's profit opportunities. To ignore this basic insight is to be biased in favor of government intervention. The policymaker looks at the economy as a snapshot in time and determines whether the market meets his or her ideal criteria. Instead, the economy should be seen as an unfolding, moving picture through time. In other words, it is the less than ideal conditions that set in motion the entrepreneurial actions that solve problems and improve the situation. Many economists and political scientists have also developed a set of practical criticisms of government solutions. This is where our tale of the Roman emperor kicks in. We have to hear the second singer sing by examining the way that choices are actually made in politics. We do so using the same principles that we use to address decision-making in the market economy. This area of research is called public choice.
Reasons for government failure.
The economic analysis of political decision-making assumes that people behave in basically the same way whether they are inside or outside government. Individuals in the voting booth and in Congress or the Houses of Parliament are the same individuals as those at the grocery store or in company boardrooms. These individuals are neither pure sinners nor pure saints. They are the same as you and me. They have purposes and plans, and they use the resources at their disposal to achieve their purposes and plans as effectively as possible. We have two sides to politics: demanders of government services and suppliers of those services. If politics worked perfectly, then the policies adopted would accurately reflect the wishes of the voters. In other words, voters' preferences would be fed into the workings of politics, and policies would come out of the other end that reflect the popular preferences of the day. It would get the government we desired. This simplistic view of the political process does not describe reality. Why does the government we have fail to live up to such an ideal? We have already argued that government cannot calculate costs and benefits. Government also has to operate without the knowledge of time and place provided by market prices and the discipline of profits and losses. At a fundamental level, policy interventions into the marketplace are grasping in the dark. We also made passing reference to the role that special interest pressure groups play in political decision-making. Let's explore that a bit more.
Voters and interest groups.
Politicians can usefully be looked at as election-seeking entrepreneurs. By definition, a politician wants to get votes and money to pay for his campaign. If he is unable to obtain these votes and contributions, he will not get elected. If an election is coming, politicians will try to gain voters' support. To do this, they will concentrate benefits in the short run and spread the costs over the long run. For example, they may increase government spending on popular projects such as an election, even if it means raising taxes in the long term. Politicians also know that many people don't bother voting, and that a lot of voters do not think it is worth taking the time to learn much about political issues. In contrast to these unorganized groups, there are special interest voters who know and care a lot about a particular issue. Politicians know that they will gain little by focusing their efforts on the ill-informed mass of voters and those who don't vote at all. They will benefit most from concentrating benefits on well-organized and well-informed special interest groups while spreading costs on everyone else. We have thus identified two sources of political failure: the short-sighted bias of politicians and the concentration of benefits on special interest groups at the expense of the wider public. But it gets worse. These special interest groups will often use substantial resources to try to get their favored policies passed. They may spend large amounts of time and money trying to influence politicians. This is called rent-seeking. They will also try to make sure that they control any government regulation of their own behavior. This is often referred to as the capture theory of regulation. Such interest group lobbying for special favors is what economists call a deadweight loss. Overall, it produces no value. It expends resources simply to take resources away from others.
Politics versus the market.
Another reason why governments fail to correct economic problems is that the nature of political goods is different from market goods. In the market economy, we can purchase goods individually. We can buy a blue shirt, khaki pants, red Adam Smith tie, and a blue blazer. In politics, we are forced to buy a bundle of goods. We may like the health policies of one politician but prefer the foreign policy of another. We cannot choose these goods separately. This creates still more differences between voter preferences and government policies. Finally, one of the strongest features of the market economy is that if a business is not satisfying consumer demand, it receives that feedback quickly. It will either have to change what it does or go bankrupt. The market disciplines its participants. The market economy is a profit and loss system, and the loss element is critical to its operation. Instead of being disciplined by the profit and loss mechanism, politicians are disciplined at the voting booth. The voting booth, however, is slower and more ambiguous. One measure of this is the high proportion of politicians that are re-elected. Politicians turn over a lot less than businesses. We could delve into many more examples of government failure that public choice analysis exposes. For our purposes, we have laid out the three main reasons for government failure: an inability to calculate alternative policies in terms of monetary costs and benefits, a lack of responsiveness to demand resulting from the absence of profit and loss, the influence of special interest pressure groups who obtain benefits at the expense of the unorganized and ill-informed mass of voters.
Let markets work.
Markets may fail to meet ideal conditions, but this does not mean we should automatically turn to government. Instead, when we follow the advice to let the second singer sing, we often find the alternative of government regulation makes matters worse. We live in a world where perfect outcomes are not an option. When choosing between social systems, we must recognize that we are always dealing with erring entrepreneurs and bumbling bureaucrats. Markets fail and governments fail. However, we have a good reason to believe that government failure is more harmful than market failure. Not only must we always allow the second singer to sing, we must also never judge any one singer based on a first impression. Instead, we have to look at the ability of markets to adjust to changing conditions. In contrast with politics, today's problems represent tomorrow's profit opportunities in the marketplace. In other words, markets fail. Use the market to solve the failure.